Hello everyone, this is part 11 of What If Naruto Was Told About His Uzumaki Genes Early, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and to like, to subscribe, to see more, comment down below. Naruto compound, she was assaulted by a massive dose of killing intent. She found the Sandaime Hokage pacing around inside his small study with his pipe blowing out smoke. He didn't stop even at her presence. She realized, he hadn't noticed her. What could be in his mind that he would be so absorbed like this? Sandaime-sama, Yugao congratulated herself for managing to stay calm in this situation. The killing intent was frightening, it made her feel uncomfortable and afraid. It took a moment for the third to turn to her. He blinked once before smiling towards her. "Ah, Yugao-chan," he said calmly, acting normal as if nothing wrong ever happened. "Is there something wrong, Hokage-sama?" Yugao asked cautiously. The third stared at the Anbu for a moment before going to sit down. Once settled, he let loose of a long breath before staring at Yugao with an expressionless mask on his face. "Does anyone know that you are here?" Yugao shook her head. "I did as you instructed, Hokage-sama. No one followed me and no one knows I am here," she responded firmly. "Good," Hiruzen said. "Sorry about that," he said of his earlier show. Yugao merely nodded. The Sandaime didn't have to apologize to her. But this just confirmed to her that there was something was indeed wrong. There was something that was happening that was making him like this. It was either Danzo or with Naruto. Hardly anything within the village worried him much since they were at a time of peace. Aside from the trouble with the hidden cloud, there were no major issues that would get the professor pacing around as she saw him. "I made a huge mistake, Yugao. A very huge blunder that will cost Konoha," Hiruzen said without emotion. Yugao was alarmed. "What is it, Hokage-sama? What I am about to tell you is something that will not leave this room. You will not tell anyone about it, is that understood?" "Hi." Hiruzen was silent for a minute before finally speaking. "I shouldn't have told Naruto about the Uzumaki. I should have just told him about his mother, not the Uzumaki. I shouldn't have even taken him to Uzumaki. Naruto will eventually leave Konoha and I can't say anything that will change his mind, nothing." The Sandaime slammed his fist on the desk before him. "Naruto loves his clan. Some of the Uzumaki are very much alive, and if Naruto connects with them, he will join them. And there is nothing I can say to him that will make him stay. Can't you just stop him from leaving by using force?" Hiruzen shook his head. "I underestimated his drive, his desire to be Uzumaki. Naruto understands Fuinjutsu in ways that I didn't think. One day, I caught him studying space-time ninjutsu. And when I asked him about it, he said he didn't understand it. But he was lying to me, Yugao. Naruto lied to me." The third realized he'd shouted and apologized to Yugao. "I have also lied to him. I shouldn't complain much, but it seems to me that Naruto knows things he shouldn't know. If he knows space-time ninjutsu, then we can't use force to stop him from leaving. I have two options, Yugao. In both options, I must confront him. In the first option, I must manipulate him using a powerful genjutsu to ensure that he never leaves Konoha. That robs him of his freedom and Minato would probably never forgive me. There is also the danger of the Kyuubi. We manipulate his memories, not the Kyuubi. If the Kyuubi tells Naruto and shows him the truth, he will truly hate Konoha. The second option is to make sure that Naruto never becomes an enemy of Konoha." He paused. "Which option do you think is best? Which option is best for Konoha?" Yugao asked. "I don't know," Hiruzen shook his head. "What is best for Naruto? If I tell the council, they will no doubt try to extract the Kyuubi from Naruto, thus killing him. They would not want a Jinchuriki who is not loyal. If Naruto dies, Minato will not forgive me and I'll have failed both him and his son. Even if they succeed in killing him, they will make sure Naruto is never free. They will send people after him." Konohagakure Tsunade sighed tiredly as she moved away from the paperwork that has been in front of her. Every day for the past 2 years, it was signing things and assigning missions to her shinobi. There was nothing much to do other than to indulge in regrets and self-pity. Naruto had disappeared from this village. It had looked like a dream, but it had happened and they had ended up burying him. She had seen some Uzumaki, who had come here to bury one of their own. Still, it didn't ease the pain, the guilt, and the regrets. Perhaps if she had done things differently, he wouldn't have died, perhaps not. You could never know in this world, but the reality was that Naruto was dead. And it has been 2 years since he died. The one person who Tsunade had pitied was Jiraiya. He had truly been miserable in the wake of Naruto's death. He had blamed himself. He had said so many times that he had failed once more to protect those close to him. But at least he hadn't lost himself. She too was still here, and they were doing their jobs. They had the memories of the past and they would not forget. There were worries around the village, but nothing disastrous had occurred and it was rather peaceful without too many things to worry about. The past 2 years have peaceful, for Konoha at least. Kumo and Iwa have been doing some sparing sessions. They were close to a full-blown out war but worried because neither had a good relationship with Konoha. If anything does happen, Konoha was ready. The village had been preparing itself after all. She would not be defeated. Konoha would survive anything that happens. She wasn't afraid of either Kumo or Iwagakure. They had their tools. The Godime turned towards the window as Jiraiya appeared. Well, at least some things never changed. She smiled at the thought before speaking. You have been gone for a while, she said. Had some business in Nadeshiko, Jiraiya responded with a smile. Tsunade looked curious. What were you doing there? I'm surprised you even returned in one piece, she said. Perhaps the question about his business there had been stupid. Nadeshiko was a land of women. Jiraiya would certainly feel at ease being in that place. Jiraiya shrugged carelessly in response to Tsunade. You underestimate my escape jutsu, Haim, he said. Tsunade stared, wondering if he was serious. She shook her head. This was Jiraiya she was talking to, of course he was serious. I really hope that one day, someone cuts off both your hands so that you don't get to weave hand seals, she said a bit coldly. That would be cruel, Haim, Jiraiya said, wincing at the thought of being alive without both his hands. What could he do without hand seals? Could he even master a transformation jutsu? What would he do? If he could not do anything, it would be better to be dead, wouldn't it? Nothing you don't deserve, Tsunade said. What do you have for me? Jiraiya turned serious in the blink of an eye. Well, I had gone to Nadeshiko because of my research but I stumbled upon something curious, he said. Don't keep me waiting, Tsunade said impatiently. It does appear that Nadeshiko also has a relationship with the hidden whirlpools. They would not confirm it but I saw it the moment I arrived in the village. I saw someone belonging to the Uzumaki clan in the land. At this stage, it does appear that Uzumaki covers the nations around the land of water. We already know that it has connections with Kirigakure. It wasn't anything troubling. Nadeshiko had skilled kunoichi, for sure, but it certainly wasn't a village you would worry about in terms of war. However, the problem here was Uzumaki ability to move about the elemental nations without anyone knowing. Nadeshiko was a bit away from other lands but there was no telling how far Izu's reach went. Well, he could understand why Izu's leader called himself the Emperor. Jiraiya nearly snorted at the thought. There was still no sign of the said Emperor. No one has said they have seen him and Izu continued to be closed as before. It was even worse now. Jiraiya was beginning to think that there was no emperor and those people had just made the rumor to keep some mystery. They wouldn't have been the first to do something like that. In this way, the hidden nations continue to waste time and effort searching for the identity of the emperor while Uzumaki moves quietly with its business. He had gone to Kirigakure and the beautiful and dangerous Mizukage had said that although she had a relationship with Uzumaki, she still had yet to meet the emperor despite her many attempts to do so. There were really many questions about Uzumaki that refused to be answered and the revived village did nothing to ease the worries or to give some answers. Konoha had managed to form a communication line with the village. The villagers now knew just how valuable the Uzumaki had been to Konoha. They now knew that the person they had dealt with contempt had been the child of one of the greatest hero. The thought was ridiculous but it was at least something that made Tsunade smile. She had at times laughed at how miserable some of them were when they realized the truths about Naruto. Some of them had even gone as far as to try to reject the truth. It had been all amusing for her to watch. She hadn't pitied them, they had deserved it. They had been the ones to treat him like cabbage when he had just been a child. Tsunade shook her head. She shouldn't get into such thoughts. Why would Uzumaki be allied with Nadeshiko? What would they want from them? Jiraiya shook his head. He didn't know. He couldn't figure out anything. But they knew that Uzumaki was the kind of village that made movements for a reason. There was always a calculated reason behind everything. Regardless of how much he tried, he just couldn't break through some of its puzzles. I don't know, Haim, the Toad Sage said with a shake of his head. Uzushio is calculating. We know this. But I don't think there is anything interesting in Nadeshiko. I have tried thinking, I can't figure out anything. It is like with the Emperor, it might all be just a smoke made to hide the truth or attract attention. I wonder who really pulls the strings in that village, Tsunade said in thought. Perhaps she should inquire more about it. They certainly knew how to secretly handle their business. That man Yoshino who runs a zoo is certainly someone you don't want to underestimate. He makes me uncomfortable, Jiraiya said in a firm tone. His eyes turned towards the streets for a moment before glancing towards the Godime Hokage once more. What is certain is that Uzushio has great minds. That and we still can't figure out what they are trying to do, Tsunade said with a hint of frustration. Yeah, Jiraiya nodded silently. We will find out something eventually, he said with confidence. I wonder about that, Tsunade said with a slight shake of her head. She then smiled, seeing the look on Jiraiya's eyes. You're always positive. Then again, you've always been this way while some of us lose ourselves. The Toad Sage smiled, it was a bitter smile that hid his regrets and pain. Well, if I also lose myself, who'll bring you back to your senses, Haim? He managed to finish with a grin. Besides, I think when you lose hope, you stop living. I don't want that for my life. I believe that I continue to live, despite my failures, for a reason, that is why I continue to be positive. Silence reigned for a couple of moments as Tsunade absorbed those words. She had lost people and fled Konoha to drown in bitterness and pain. It hadn't brought her anything. She'd only been miserable and drowning in gambling debts. I hope you never change, Jiraiya, she said with a smile. Jiraiya grinned sheepishly. You know I'm going to remain the same, Haim, he said. There was silence. It lasted for a couple of minutes, both lost in their thoughts. There were thoughts of pain, love and the joys of life, the past and the happiness and the present, and a bit about the future. All thoughts came to a halt when a certain Uchiha came into the office. Tsunade stared at the Ravenhead. Since she permitted him to move about without restrictions, he has certainly used the freedom to do many things. She could confidently say Sasuke was one of the best shinobi she had. He certainly stood out from the rest of his generation. He was unique and served the Hidden Leaf well. He had ambitions to become Hokage. Tsunade knew this, but she didn't concern herself by giving it much thought. It was too early for Sasuke to be thinking about being a Kage. Since Naruto's death, he has taken it upon himself to be Konoha's guardian. He worked solo. Tsunade didn't complain. No one aside from Sakura complained. Things were even better that way because Sasuke stayed out of trouble and just minded his own business. Everyone was happy, well, almost everyone. One thing that had rubbed off Tsunade the wrong way was his apparent happiness in Naruto's demise. Perhaps the blonde had been competition or a threat. She never got around it. She never bothered about it, because quite frankly, she didn't want to know. What do you have for me this time? Tsunade asked in a reserved tone, eyes watching the Uchiha carefully. There isn't any shinobi activity around Uzushio, Sasuke said, his voice lacking any emotion. Expected, Tsunade grunted with a nod, her tone mild. Azu remained as secretive as ever. But we do know that they have some military presence. Sasuke nodded to this. Without doubt, he said. Kumo and Iwagakure haven't picked up anything on it. It is better this way, Tsunade said. Since Iwa started to have troubles with Kumogakure over the failed assassination attempt of the Raikage, Onoki had diverted his attention to the cloud. It was the most dangerous. Tsunade wasn't concerned much about it because it didn't affect Konoha. Those two could fight, but Konoha would not get involved. Things don't appear like they will change soon unless something happens, Sasuke said. There have been some rumors about ships moving from the islands within the water country heading towards Uzushiogakure. It does appear that the village has been building something. Tsunade frowned upon hearing this and turned towards her former teammate and a longtime admirer. Do you think it has something to do with Princess Kyuki's visit? We didn't get anything on why she visited, but we know it had something to do with Snow's technology. The wave country had certainly benefited from this. The country's population has increased massively due to its economic growth and Uzushio's influence. The water feudal lord even viewed the nation as an enemy. One thing that was unique in the wave was its method of transportation, trains. They were not there in a zoo, but there was no doubt that they were developed there because of a zoo. Most probably, Jiraiya said. I think that they are also using the same technology in building the bridge that connects Uzumaki and the wave. The damn bridge. Tsunade didn't have anything to say about it. It was just after Naruto died that they made the plans known that they wanted easier method of transportation between the wave and Uzu. The bridge has been in the process of being built for the past 2 years now and it was still being built. It should soon be completed. About that, there does seem to be some cooperation between the wave and Omegakure. The Akatsuki has also been offering protection to the bridge builders and we have established that the organization is located in the rain. Perhaps it is time we stopped thinking the organization as more than just a mercenary group. Tsunade nodded to this. Your brother was a former member, what did he say about it? The Akatsuki likely has a deeper relationship with Uzumaki. He didn't say why, but he mentioned that Uzumaki hired his services in a couple of occasions and he'd spend months there. Sasuke said with a shake of his head. I will stay for a while before heading out to check the borders between the cloud and Iwagakure. Tsunade nodded and watched the Uchiha leave without saying anything. Once he was gone, she turned to Jiraiya. How long do you think this will last? She asked curiously. I don't know, Haim, Jiraiya said with a shake of his head. He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking deep. I don't think it will last long though. The fifth Hokage agreed to this but she didn't offer an immediate response. Kumo and Iwa are still busy with their problems but eventually, when the bridge is completed and we will find out more about Uzu's military strength, they will act. No doubt, Jiraiya answered in a quiet tone. And Konoha was going to be dragged into it if Kumo and Iwa decide to go after Uzu. It was going to be war. Uzumaki probably doesn't care, isn't it? Despite how they might act, we have to start thinking that the village isn't as innocent as it likes us to believe. The secrecy doesn't even help matters. Jiraiya pushed back his frustration over the way Uzu tried to handle matters. He had told those people to at least try to reach out to both Kumo and Iwa but they refused. They didn't care about any of Yoshino's response to his warning about a possible attack from Iwa had been indifference and words along the line of, it would be unfortunate. The indifference really did bother him. But at least with how things are, it will be difficult for Iwa and Kumo to work with each other. Tsunade knew she shouldn't smile about this, but she did. The fact that those two couldn't trust each other could save them from war. But it still won't stop either of them from making move. Yeah, they could even call a temporary truce, Jiraiya said with a thoughtful look on his face. He amused himself with the thought that the moment the fight was over, they would fight. For now, they were restrained but once they got into the fighting spirit, there would be no stopping. If Iwa moves, Omegakure is in trouble. Tsunade frowned deeply. She hasn't become too cold-hearted that she would ignore the misfortune of another village because it didn't affect her. Omegakure has always been used as a battleground during wars. Iwa would use the rain as its path and its shinobi would eventually head to the village, looking for food, a troubling situation that only gave rise to war orphans on lands that aren't even involved in the fighting but just caught in the crossfire. Have you spoken to Nagato about it? Jiraiya shook his head. He had a frown about him as he responded. He has refused to speak to me. They won't even let me walk into Omegakure. Last time, I was literally kicked out. Is it their connections with Uzumaki? Most probably, Jiraiya said with a nod. I will keep trying. If something is going to happen, Nagato will take part of it. He is the last of my students and he holds the Rinnegan. If he turns out to be the enemy. Jiraiya shook his head. With how he dealt with people in Omegakure after replacing Hanzo as leader, I believe Nagato wouldn't have hesitated to kill me if he thought I could be an enemy. From what Jiraiya had said, the Rinnegan wielder had slaughtered anyone he so much as suspected to be a traitor. All those related to Hanzo wiped out, young, old and innocent. He killed everyone without discrimination, a brutal method of strengthening your grip on power. Iwagakure for long, Onoki had come to conclude that his war with Kumogakure would not go anywhere. He shook his head. It wasn't his war. He had nothing but disdain over the fact. If the Reikage had allowed him when he visited Kumo, the Sandaime Tsushikage would have turned those men into ashes for their foolishness. Who tries to assassinate the Reikage? He had faced disappointments before but that had been one of those worst moments. He looked at shinobi from his village with contempt and pure unadulterated anger. If they wanted to do a job right, they shouldn't have failed. If they failed, they shouldn't have gotten caught. What a bunch of idiots. He was certain though. He had been certain before then when the Reikage spoke to him. It was either the Raikage was making up the attack to get something from him or someone was trying to frame him. After seeing the situation, he could not deny that the attack had happened and the shinobi were his. Idiots, yes. Complete fools and disgraces to the Iwa name, yes, but they were still his shinobi and that was fact he could not escape as hard as he may try. Still, Onoki hadn't planned the attack. He has continued to deny it even to this day because he hadn't planned it. Would it have pleased him if the man was dead? Most certainly, hell, he would have even celebrated. Without a, Kumo would be weakened. It would no longer have the fastest man in the shinobi world. He hadn't denied this to the Raikage. He had told him straight ahead that if he had died, he would have been happy but he'd never gone as far as to plot for the man's death. Someone had plotted it and then blamed it on him. Someone was framing him. Onoki was certain of it. Those were his shinobi. He could not deny that. But shinobi could be bought, they could be manipulated. It gave him no pleasure thinking that his shinobi would betray him, the hidden stone, but it would be naive for him to ignore the possibility. He hadn't sent him to Kumo and he had searched this village upside down, interrogating people and threatening people left and right but nothing came out of it. The culprit wasn't here, he was somewhere between Konoha and Uzumaki. Who benefited from Iwa's war with Kumogakure? Konoha would certainly benefit and given his conversation with Jiraiya, it had a lot more to benefit from the war. Uzumaki could not be taken out of the picture. There was no telling what the village was capable of doing. And with the continued bickering with the hidden cloud, it was evident that the village benefited greatly. A coordinated effort by the villagers could not be taken out as well. Either way, Onoki would find out who did it and he would make them pay dearly. The Sandaime Tsushikage sighed tiredly and put away the latest letter from the fourth Raikage before leaning against his large chair. He closed his eyes for a moment to sort out his thoughts. Once done, his eyes snapped open. He saw Kuretsuki staring at him intently. A pity, Kuretsuki said with a small frown on her lips, but her tone was laced with mild amusement. I'd thought you'd kick the bucket while sitting like that. Onoki snorted disdainfully. I still have many years to live, he spoke through gritted teeth. Because he was speaking like that because he was trying to show that he was still at the top of his game. Which is indeed a problem for me, Kuretsuki said and stared at her grandfather for a moment before turning away from him. She walked towards the couch in the office and threw herself at it. Seeing her relax, Onoki spoke. You want to replace me that much? Yes, Kuretsuki answered in a hardened tone. I almost want to help you reach that level of death. If I knew where the bucket death was, I'd drag it towards you just so you can kick it. Onoki sneered and his expression twisted with anger, not with Kuretsuki. Not at her words. You must at least do an excellent job unlike those idiots who were bold enough to get into the Raikage's house but yet still failed to kill him. I'm not a fool. Then at least you won't turn out to be a disappointment, Onoki said a bit sharply. What do you have? Onoki had acknowledged that Kumo wasn't going away and the Yondaime Raikage wasn't going to believe him. He had come in terms with this fact. Kuretsuki was the only person who could succeed him. She was the future of Iwagakure and he'd been shielding her from the whole Kumo incident. He didn't want anything bad happening to her. It would break him. Iwagakure would have suffered a great loss. He had shifted away her attention to Uzumaki. There was a less chance of getting killed. Konoha and Uzumaki can't coordinate anything. It is highly unlikely that they work together, Kuretsuki said in a tired tone. What gives you that impression? Both nations have become allied once more, Onoki said. Kuretsuki nodded to this, it was truth. Konohagakure and Uzumaki were allies. But, Konoha probably knows as much as we do about Uzumaki. The village remains locked up and doesn't reveal anything to Konoha. It is almost as if they don't trust the leaf. That doesn't surprise me, Onoki said, but he didn't explain the reasoning behind his response. Any military activity? Kuretsuki shook her head. None whatsoever, I hope it keeps being that way, Onoki said. He certainly didn't want a strong Uzumaki. If the village strengthened, he would be in a dangerous situation because he would be tempted to invade it. But the moment he does so, Kumogakure was going to attack him from behind. He could not underestimate Uzu. He could not forget that Kumo could strike any moment he displays an opening. What of Konoha? Nothing good, Kuretsuki grunted. Aside from the loss of their Jinchuriki, they have been steadily strengthening over the past 2 years. Onoki frowned. I shouldn't have reminded Jiraiya had we outnumber them. If I hadn't done so or even threatened them, they would have continued with the peaceful ways. I was careless. At this moment, he cursed that conversation he had with Jiraiya. If he had known, he would have done things differently. But he had not known. Well, at least they no longer have a Jinchuriki. And what is this that I hear that Naruto was as strong as Jiraiya even without the Kyuubi? I don't know for sure, but they seem to think so. It doesn't matter anyway, he is dead, Kuretsuki said. Although she didn't display any emotion, there was bitterness inside of her. They never became friends. He had died before anything could happen. Onoki smiled. Well, at least that is something good that happened. We can say, bless Konoha for losing one of their assets. Azu, the silence, the peace, and the feeling that he was outside of the human world. It was certainly a feeling Naruto enjoyed. He couldn't tell what was happening within the village while in the throne room, but he did not complain. He had made it this way, for his peace, his solitude. He was mostly alone in this place. But he couldn't have it any other way. If he wanted to get a feeling of what occurred in the village and being down on earth once more, Naruto could always sit in the normal throne room. This was for his solitude, his peace, and his sentimental time. It was slightly dark while he was alone. When someone stepped into the throne room, the lights would turn on. But it was made that it would slightly shadow his face. Then again, he never really received people in this place. He had yet to even receive anyone in the other throne room. The time had yet to come, but now it had arrived. He had to step away from the shadows and face the elemental nations. Not as Naruto Uzumaki, but as the Emperor Naoki's form materialized from thin air just beside the throne. He leaned over to Naruto's left ear and whispered. Lady Karen has arrived, Your Majesty, he said. Naruto didn't offer any reaction to this for a couple of seconds before finally nodding his head. He then smiled. I guess it is time to face the shinobi world, he said. Naoki shared the smile, but he shook his head. You get too excited easily, he said. Naruto's eyes glanced towards the man for a moment before shrugging with nonchalance. You have no right to tell me that. Besides, I have been in the shadows for a bit too long, I have to get excited about facing the light once more. To face the darkness was your choice, Your Majesty, Naoki reminded in a firm tone. Everything has been by your desires. Regardless of who the enemy was, we have always been ready to serve you. I wasn't complaining, Naruto said in a flat tone. It appeared to me that you were, Naoki said, staring straight towards Naruto's eyes. When the Emperor fixed him a look, he blinked and changed the subject. Should we get moving? Karen can be quite impatient at times and she gets very difficult to handle when she is high. Naruto thought about it for a moment before slowly standing up. We will walk. I want to know about what has been happening with Sasuke along the way. Naoki glanced at Naruto curiously before showing the blonde the way. He knew that the Emperor didn't give a damn about the Uchiha. He just acknowledged the fact that Sasuke could be a major threat if not handled carefully. Perhaps it was the fact that he had managed to be lectured by his elder brother. But it had all been according to His Majesty's desires, hadn't it? Once they stepped out of the throne room, Naoki looked up into the sky for a moment before responding to Naruto. He has been doing his missions and using the Mangekyo Sharingan. Naruto grinned. Then all is according to the script then, he said. Very soon, he will be getting blind. Soon it can't heal him. She might be the best, but there is nothing she can do about the blinding of the Sharingan. It doesn't appear that he has been talking to her about it either, Naoki said. Well, it is something that is genetic. As long as he continues to use the Sharingan, he will continue to deteriorate his vision, Naruto said. He was still smiling. I wonder if we should let him go blind for a couple of years. If I didn't know any better, I'd say that you were really angry about his attempts to kill you, Your Majesty, Naoki said. Naruto snorted with disdain at the thought. Ridiculous thoughts, he said in a flat tone. I know, Naoki said. You could have stopped him from leaving if you wanted to. I could have even stopped him myself. It would have been inconvenient, Naruto said with a slight shake of his head. The atmosphere within the village was truly delightful. The air wasn't diluted and polluted with hatred because of the hatred and anger. There was life here. There was no longer the sense of dread and despair that had once filled this village when he came here. Things have changed. The buildings had grown tall. People surrounded the buildings. The streets were filled with people, his people. The Uzumaki were at home. They were the nobles of this village. It didn't make anyone less of a secondary citizen. Uzumaki had grown. He had turned it from a village of despair to a village of hope and desires. This was his home, his village, and he had a duty to protect it, its people, because they were his people. Things have worked out nonetheless, Naruto added, smiling. We must be ready for anything. I have prepared myself fully to fight any kind of battle against anyone. After walking for a bit around the streets, the two shined away and appeared in the middle of the forest. They walked for a bit and arrived in a clear field where a large airship stood on the ground. Karen was checking everything with Gurren and Haku standing a distance away from the airship. It was a majestic crimson bird with no wings. It was slightly rectangular in shape, its body made of steel. It was a warship. It had weapons fitted for massive destruction. He could lay waste to any village if he wanted. Operating it was the major problem. It required massive amounts of chakra. Naruto could either use natural chakra or the Kyuubi's power to power it up. This was his personal battleship and his method of transportation. Naruto had to thank the Springs technology as well as the Sky Nation's relics for this bird of his. Your Majesty, Gurren greeted with a small bow while Haku greeted with a smile. This is beautiful, isn't it? He asked calmly. It is, Gurren said. When do we get to ride it? Who said you would? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow, an amused look spreading through his lips. Gurren blinked. But I thought Haku said we would be assigned as your guards when you start getting out. If we are getting out, we should be getting in that thing. Naruto shook his head. You are not getting on that. I am only taking Haku with me. You have your duties to handle, he said a bit firmly. Gurren frowned at the thought. It was cruel being deprived of the joys of flying in the air. She almost stiffened when Naruto put a sympathetic hand on her shoulder. Well, we will tell you how it is like to fly, he said with a grin. Amused, Haku spoke. Don't listen to them, Gurren. They are cruel people who are just messing with you, he said calmly. Your sadistic tendencies better not fall on His Majesty, Naruto, he shot the Uzumaki a glare. Naruto laughed. Don't be ridiculous, Haku. This woman is a sadistic bitch herself, he said in a mild tone. He then tilted his head to the side. Do you really believe that I am capable of influencing His Majesty? Haku turned towards Naruto for a moment. The blonde appeared to have lost interest in the conversation the moment he mentioned that they were playing with Gurren. His eyes were firmly on the airship. Was there anyone who could manipulate the Emperor or become a bad influence? Haku shook his head. Yoshino has said it a couple of times that despite what people say about him, he had learned from Naruto. Naruto wasn't cruel, but Yoshino was. Perhaps when Naruto said kill someone, they took it a step further and they saw it as approval when he said nothing about it. He was the one who was superior to all these people. I don't think anyone can, Haku finally admitted. He glanced back towards the ship feeling Karen walk towards them. He smiled at the lady of Uzumaki. She was a woman amongst other women. You like. Karen ignored Naruto and spoke directly to Naruto. The blonde nodded his head. You have outdone yourself this time, wife, he said with a wide smile. Karen put her fingers on her glasses and flashed a smile. I want to take the credit, but I didn't do much with this thing. You'll have to thank the team who worked around the clock to build this for you. This is also the land of Springs technology. We should also thank your other wife for this. There is no need to thank Springs. They were merely returning the favor for our support to get them out of their poor economic status after Kyuubi took the position of feudal lord from her uncle, Naruto said. But since they have been faithful, I guess we can thank their cooperation to our dreams. Didn't we bother helping them because you saw the potential? Naruto asked. Yes, but I didn't think she would end up asking me to marry her though. Well, no matter, he said with indifference. When can we take it for a spin around the great nations? I feel like announcing the greatness of the Uzumaki already, he said with a wide smile. Karen shook her head. Any time you wish, she said. It is yours after all. You are correct about that, he said before tilting his head to the side. But I thought you were laying claim to everything that I own, he said. Karen shrugged. I wanted to make you feel better by not saying it is mine as well, she said while smiling. I imagine it is going to be a huge battle of control, when we break up, he said. Who said we are going break up? We made a vow, even if I can't stand you or have thoughts to murder you in your sleep, I will fight the urges because we will not separate. We will die together. Together is a long time, especially for us. I want to take those words back, Naruto said. Naruto cleared his throat before the conversation could drift any further. Shouldn't you leave that for private? Karen shrugged carelessly. Haku will show you how to operate it. I'm going back to the island. I was hoping you'd spend the night in our bed, Naruto said. Karen stared at him for a long minute before shrugging. I'm sure you have a mistress to keep you company. But I better not find anyone in my bed when I come back. There will be consequences should that occur. You better not stay away then, Naruto said with a smile. I'm almost certain that your husband is going to sooner the moment he gets on that airship. To see? Karen asked with narrowed eyes. He managed to find a certain blonde there, the sister of the Kazekage, Naruto said. What is he talking about, Naruto? For a moment, Naruto considered telling Naruto that he was fired from his job. He decided against it before shrugging. He is talking about things that don't concern him. I'll have to rewire him so that he can function as needed. Karen stared at Naruto strangely before agreeing with him. Well, when one of your tools doesn't operate the way you want, there is no other way other than to rewire it or just dispose of it. Naruto blinked. How had it come to this? He had been merely trying to get Naruto in trouble or just trying to stir up things because he knew that the blonde would not care. If he was serious with Temari, he would not be mad because it was something he was eventually going to discuss with the lady. Your Majesty. Naruto ignored the man and spoke to Karen. There is Temari from Sunagakure. We will talk more about it when you come back home. We don't talk about these things since you prefer sitting in that island than being in my absence. Karen shrugged indifferently. I know the moment I arrive back to the compound, I will be expected to drop babies like a bird laying eggs. I'm not ready for that. Ara, Naruto smiled with amusement. I thought we married for love and your return would be so that you can love me. Karen laughed. There is that, she said. We will get to it when the time is right. You did things in your terms and stayed away from Uzumaki. I can be offered the same opportunity. Naruto smiled, head tilted to the side. Well, I am the emperor, aren't I? He asked pleasantly. But it is fine, you can do as you like. Everyone seems to do as they please around here, he said. Karen smiled happily and shortened the distance between them before kissing him on the right cheek. I'll see you soon, she said. I'll be overseeing the prison building and my other projects. Don't invoke too much chaos in the world, otherwise there will be no peace. Why do you make it sound like I would go all the way out to invite trouble? Naruto asked, eyebrow raised, his voice sounded honestly curious. Karen stared at him for a moment before walking away without saying another word. Naruto turned to Haku and asked, Am I that bad of a person, Haku? He asked. Haku smiled. Of course not, you are a delightful person, he said. Gurren raised a brow and stared at the ice user for a moment. You know, it does sound like out of everyone close to him, you're the only one who says that, she said. Are you suggesting that I am not a nice person, Gurren? Naruto asked. Gurren shook her head. Quite honestly, he was a tolerant person and sometimes convenient. He sometimes did allow his subordinates to do as they like, as long as they followed his instructions when necessary. But she had come to understand that sometimes the instructions depended on your interpretation, especially with Naruto and sometimes with Yoshino. The latter's excuse will be that the emperor would like it better being done that way. No, Gurren said with a shake of her head. His Majesty is a good person. It is just that people don't usually say it, which makes it a bit interesting and curious. Naruto thought about it for a moment before shrugging. I should order them to say nice things then, he said. Naruto, you stay behind, I will depart with Gurren and Haku. Yoshino should know what to do in my absence. I won't spend much time away. I am just going to make a stop in Suna before returning. This is a better way to announce my return from the dead. Suna. Gurren asked just to see if Naruto had been right to say that he was going to the hidden sand. Naruto merely smiled and motioned for the two to lead the way towards the airship. Haku led him towards a large entrance at the right side of the ship. The doors automatically slid open as they neared and stepped into a silent passage. They walked for a bit before reaching two paths. Haku pointed at the narrow passage ahead and spoke. You have resting chambers on this side, he said as they turned to a corner. The bridge is this way, he said. They stumbled upon the heart of the ship, It was like a throne room. There was a large throne that Naruto settled on while Haku and Gurren stood by both his sides. The blonde smiled as rested his head on the palm of his right hand. I can get used to this, he said. Haku shook his head. Not too used to it, I hope, he said. Naruto nodded his head and glanced at Haku, who was on his right side. Where is the heart of this thing? He asked curiously. Haku pointed below them. Your throne is fitted with chakra receivers and a chakra absorption seal. You can either give supply the chakra to start the airship, or you can activate the seal to start absorbing chakra from you. It is also fitted with chakra storage seals to be able to function without any help from you. How much chakra are we talking about? It only absorbs much when it is starting, but when we get into the air, it doesn't use much chakra. The weapons though will be the ones that drain much chakra, Gurren responded. I haven't seen the destructive force, but I really want to see it, she said with a grin. So do it, Gurren, Naruto said with a smile of his own. But it won't look good if we are just firing at nothing. It looks much better when there is an enemy in front of us that we can use as a test subject. I doubt we will come to this point though. My only interest is intimidation. Perhaps we will use it for those who come to us through the sea, but it is by land, we fight head on, he said. Haku shook his head. I hope you take into consideration that not everyone loves a good battle as you do, he said. Naruto merely shrugged and asked for how he activates the seal that absorbs chakra. Haku showed him and he did so. The airship breathed a bit loudly before it slowly started to pick up into the air. When it got into air, Naruto frowned because he could not see the view of the world and the vast quite clearly from the bridge. Well, this is rather unpleasant, he said. Make sure we head straight above the hidden leaf as he go to sooner and be at full speed. Yes, your majesty. Do you think that all will be well in Sunagakure? Haku asked in a quiet tone. Naruto hadn't told Temari that he was going to play dead. He had indeed died, but he could have still told her that he was alive, but he did not tell her anything. She was most definitely going to be angry with him if what Naruto had said had some truth in it. I don't know, Naruto said in a thoughtful tone. Well, if it doesn't work out, we can't force the issue, can we, Haku? People are free to choose who they like and who they want to associate with. If Temari decides that I am not worth her time, we cannot force her to do anything she doesn't like. We will accept it. Freedom, huh? Yes, Naruto said. Everyone loves it after all. Sunagakure Gaara was standing at the walls that surrounded the hidden sand, hands folded together with an expressionless mask staring at the airship that had flown above the village. It had been alarming and a dangerous situation. Any hidden village would certainly struggle from aerial threats. Perhaps it was what had made the Sky Nation dangerous. The moment he had seen the ship, Gaara had moved out and prepared his shinobi. They were living in a dangerous world. Anything could happen. He hasn't made enemies, but it didn't mean that someone wouldn't try to attack them for some other reason. It was such world. Gaara glanced at his right as Baki flashed before him along with a number of shinobi. Is the village secure? He asked in a stern tone. Yes, Baki said with a slight nod of his head. Do you think we are under attack? I don't know, but you can't be sure about anything in this world. We haven't made enemies out of any nation that would be bold enough to attack us like this, the fifth Kazekage responded. But we still have to be careful. Baki nodded. There was no harm in being cautious. There would be nothing lost, just something gained. If it was indeed an attack, maybe they would have attacked while still in air, he offered. I considered that, Gaara said. But he was not expecting anyone. None of the villages he was allied with had something like this. It was not Konoha. It certainly wasn't Iwa or Kumo. What would those two even want here in the first place? If it was them, wouldn't they have just decided to attack without a warning? We just have to wait and see, he said. Naruto stepped out of the airship in majestic crimson robes with the word Emperor written on the back. Both Haku and Gurren were flanking both his sides. When he touched the desert sand, he stopped and stared into the sky before breathing in the air. The wind was still strong as before. The air was truly speaking to him. This was the wind country, the land that made his blood excited and his senses going haywire. So this is the wind and that is Sunagakure, Haku said as he looked around. How uncomfortable, he muttered with a slight frown on his lips. At least to you, Gurren said to Haku. Someone seems to be enjoying the atmosphere, she added glancing at Naruto who was still motionless, eyes cast up into the heavens. Wind is his natural affinity, Haku said. He should enjoy feeling strong wind like this, he said. I have grown to used to better conditions than this. This kind of place is certainly not a good battlefield for someone who uses water and ice. I wouldn't have any such problems, Gurren said. I can fight in any environment. But when you have an environment like this, it is easy to see why even though Suna has always been the weakest of the Great Five, it has never been invaded by any village. They are in their home field like this, Naruto said. The Kazekage also manipulates sand. If you end up coming here to fight them, even if you win, you suffer massive casualties. Well, at least Uzashio has no beef with the sand. After saying those words, Naruto held out both his hands. Gurren and Haku looked for a moment before taking his hand. Wind surrounded him and formed like a twisting tornado. But when it started moving, it moved like a wind-gentle gust before stopping near the shield of Suna Shinobi and their Kazekage. Gaara's eyes widened slightly. How long has it been? But his eyes were not mistaken. His senses were not mistaken. He was seeing Naruto Uzumaki before him. It hadn't been someone else who came to threaten him and his village. This unannounced visit was from a person who was thought dead. No, Naruto had died. He had seen his body. He could not have faked his death because Tsunade would have realized it. She was the best medic after all. Naruto had died 2 years ago. But he was standing right before him. He could not have faked his death because he had indeed died. But how was he before him looking very much alive? Why was it that for the past 2 years he had remained dead and then now he suddenly appeared? Out of everything he knew about Uzashio, he knew that the black-haired person was a shinobi of the whirlpools. That aside, both shinobi surrounding the blonde were wearing Azu foreheads protectors. Unlike last time, Naruto's clothing did not display his clan's symbol. Gaara crumbled into dust before materializing in front of the Azu group. Both Haku and Gurren didn't react when the Kazekage appeared followed by his shinobi. You feel and seem like Naruto, but are you really, Naruto Uzumaki? Naruto smiled. It was perhaps understandable that Gaara would offer this kind of greeting. Tsunade would have certainly lunged towards him with every intention of breaking every bone in his body. What do you think, Gaara? Naruto shook his head. Kazekage. Gaara stared at Naruto for a moment. He could not mistake it. He had been right. This was indeed Naruto. You are Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto shook his head, making Gaara tilt his head to the side with confusion. I am indeed Naruto Uzumaki, he said smiling. What am I missing? Last time I stood before you as Naruto of Konoha, but today, I stand before you as Naruto Uzumaki, the Emperor of Uzashiogaku. Naruto introduced himself. He did notice that the people around the Kazekage stiffened slightly at his words, but he didn't pay it too much attention. Gaara stared. It was already a shock that Naruto was alive and not dead even though he had seen his corpse. There was no doubt on the dying part. It was a shock to see him, but for him to turn up as Azu's emperor. It was ridiculous. Gaara couldn't believe it. But it was in front of him. Naruto had just said it and these people with him were shinobi from the hidden whirlpools. What was happening in this world? This was a shock that was going to turn this world upside down. Who could have thought that the person who appeared in this village while training was actually an emperor? Not just an emperor but the emperor. Gaara glanced at the airship behind Naruto. This just meant that the death had been a ploy. Naruto, the emperor of Uzashiogaku. It was truly unbelievable. How had it even happened when the blonde had been in Konoha his whole life? He wasn't privy to the inner workings of the Leaf, but he at least knew that there hadn't been a point where Naruto disappeared from Konoha for some time. No, the blonde had been around. If there had been a connection, anyone would believe that the Uzumaki had approached him. But not that he was the emperor. They simply could not have just made him the emperor because he was a Jinchuriki. No, there was a reason and not like why he was made Kazekage. Gaara stared at Naruto with an expressionless mask. He did not display happiness even knowing that the person he once called friend was very much alive. This person had deceived them. He had lied to them. I really can't say I am happy to see you alive, Naruto. Gaara said in an honest tone. I didn't expect you to dance at the sight of my presence, Naruto said with a careless shrug of his shoulders. Gaara was silent for a minute. Their indifference was still there. It seemed that not much had changed. That was at least something good. Then you are prepared for anything. Of course, Naruto said with a nod of his head. I heard that some people cried for me when they learned I was dead. Heard? Gaara asked with a raised brow. Well, I was dead for a while before raised from the dead, Naruto said calmly. He spoke as if it was nothing serious. Perhaps for him death wasn't a frightening thing. Maybe the Kyuubi was right to say for the Uzumaki, the state of being dead was merely a state of being inactive. How did they manage that? Sunagakure has a forbidden jutsu that reincarnates a dead person, but it comes at the cost of one's life, and there is really only one person who knows this kinjutsu, Gaara said with curiosity. Clan secrets, Naruto said in a dismissive tone. Are we going to be allowed to enter the village? We really can't stand here all day, Naruto said to Gaara, but he wasn't looking at the Kazekage, but the person who was standing a bit away from the group. Gaara glanced behind. Temari. It was likely that Naruto hadn't come here for him but to speak to his sister. They were probably the first to know that he had returned from the dead, and by looks of things, his death had been planned. His sister had been hurt. She had been wounded by his death. She hadn't known anything. That was certain. I wonder about that, Gaara said calmly. Naruto tilted his head to the side. You wonder. What is it that you wonder, Kazekage? It is really simple, you choose to let me enter your village, if you don't want to, we leave. Is it really that simple? We have come to learn that nothing is ever simple with you, Uzumaki, Gaara said. Naruto smiled. People just misunderstand us, he said calmly. But yes, it is that simple. You are the one who said he considers me a friend. And I am here because of that. Not my sister. Ah, Naruto continued smiling. I misspoke. I did come here for your sister. She was crying at your death. She has been in pain, and your death is something that appears to have been planned. I wonder if I should really let you go near her because you might hurt her again. I still consider you a friend, but I really cannot allow even my friend to hurt my sister. I understand that, Naruto said with a slight nod of his head. This is why I say to you, you choose what you want to do. Gaara stared at Naruto for a long minute before standing aside, letting Naruto know that he could move ahead and see his sister. You two may return to the ship, Naruto said to his company. I trust that I will be safe in the care of the Kazekage. I won't take long. I'd like to see the village a bit, Haku said in response. Do as you like, Naruto said before he started walking away. But if you stay for too long, I will leave you behind. Gurren blinked and turned to Haku. Is he serious about leaving us behind? Haku nodded. His Majesty will allow you to do as you please, but when he says we leave, we leave. If you stay behind and get attacked, he might not help you out. If he allows you to do something, you can do it, but when you are needed, you are needed. Anything less is a problem. A few minutes later, Temari was shaking in anger. There was no relief seeing this person. If it was there, it was buried under the anger she felt. He had died and she had seen his body. She had cried thinking really he had died. He hadn't spared her from the pain, even her. He had let her cry for him. She had been pained and he had probably just watched her agony without care. And now he turns up like this. What did he want from her? Naruto wasn't smiling as he faced Temari. I came here prepared for anything, Temari. If you feel that you must shout at me, you can do it. If you feel that you must slam your fan on, before he could even finish speaking, Temari had only hit him with her fan. She didn't hit him once. She hit him with until she grew tired. Naruto received the hits without wincing. He just stood there and took the pain. Once Temari grew tired, he moved closer to her and pulled her to his chest. She dropped her fan, but her hands did not touch him. He could feel her body trembling. Naruto wrapped his hands around her and whispered. It's difficult for me to empathize, but I am truly sorry for your pain. But for my village's survival, I had to die. My life means nothing, I live for my village. Perhaps I should have informed you, but I did not. If you want to hate and curse me, you can do it. If you tell me that you no longer like me and don't want to see me again, I will leave you. But I came here because I want you closer. That is my wish, my desire. About an hour later, I wish you could sit with me so we can talk, Gaara said to Naruto. He was walking the blonde towards his airship alone. Naruto could not deny that the person who called him a friend truly had a lot to say to him and questions to ask, but Naruto hadn't come here for that. He didn't want to entertain any questions about Uzushio. Besides that, his mood was a little put off by what had happened with Temari. There will be time for that, he said after a moment of silence. Gaara shook his head. I figured that you came here for my sister, but this revelation tells me you understand what is happening in this world, he said in a firm tone. Naturally, Naruto said, casting a curious glance towards the Kazekage. Does something bother you about my appearance and my connections to Uzumaki? It is curious, and if I said it didn't bother me I wouldn't be honest, Gaara managed to say after a couple of moments of thinking. You were dead and now you suddenly return as the emperor of Uzumaki. What are the other nations going to think about your appearance? What is Konoha going to think? What Konoha thinks is irrelevant, Naruto said with indifference. Gaara didn't find this surprising. Naruto's problems with Konoha ran deeper. His childhood in the Hidden Leaf hadn't been pleasant, but as far as he was concerned, the blonde hadn't held contempt towards the leaf. It could have been fairly hidden. At this stage, nothing much would surprise him. This was the very person who literally died and then came back from the dead, on his terms. Do you hate the Hidden Leaf? That is irrelevant to any equation, Naruto answered. Irrelevant. Perhaps with how Naruto saw it, it could be not make any difference, but other people would care. Still, this just told him that whatever Naruto would do and his relationship with Konoha will not be based on his thoughts regarding the village. It was probably going to be based on convenience. I see, Gaara said with a thoughtful look on his face. Then answer me, Naruto, are we enemies or friends? Naruto stopped and glanced at Gaara before asking. What is that you think, Gaara? I think we are not enemies, but that is solely based on the fact that you came here for my sister, nothing more. I don't know of your intentions. With how Uzumaki has been doing things and your role as the emperor, there is something that is being planned. Do you still consider me a friend? Yes, Gaara said with a nod of his head. Even if we become enemies, I don't think that anything will change. Naruto smiled. The Kazekage would stab him even if he does still consider him a friend. Perhaps it was like how Jiraiya viewed Orochimaru. Despite what the snake has done, Jiraiya still saw the friend that he once had. If I am your friend, then you have nothing to worry about. Uzumaki will not provoke anyone, but it will defend itself. Kazekage, someday, we will talk. Naruto waved at the Kazekage and disappeared off to this airship. Guren and Haku were already present. He smiled seeing them. Disappointing, he said. I thought you'd be still in the village. Just so you could leave us behind. No, Naruto said. Just so I can watch you travel all the way back to Uzumaki. You two are already known in the elemental nations, and if you were to travel on foot, it would be interesting to see how shinobi react to your presence. Would they attack you or just leave you alone? You know we will be attacked, Guren said with a stare. I don't know that, Naruto said with a shrug. He settled on his chair and released a long breath, resting his head on the palm on his right hand as he did. This was rather disappointing. Well, the human heart is something else. You can't always predict what happens. You can only blame yourself for messing up things, Haku said in a stern tone. You could have told her about it. I'm sure she would have been able to keep quiet. You could have also branded her to ensure that she can't talk about it either, but you did not. You chose to let her suffer. If she hates your presence, that is all on you. Naruto's eyes glanced towards Haku before he spoke. That is rather cruel of you to say, he said. But it is the truth, Haku said with a shrug. Why did not you not tell her anyway? Who knows? Naruto said. I can't explain some of the things I do, perhaps I didn't fully trust her or I just wanted to see if she really cared for me. Her tears in my death would mean that she cared. Well, this is nothing more than a challenge that I can climb. Things would be interesting if you two decided to enter relationships. His eyes moved towards Guren. Has anyone approached you? Guren blinked. Why would you ask that? You are my subordinate, Naruto responded calmly. And I did tell you that you have to create a clan, he said. Have you taken a liking to Yoshino? That man. Guren shook her head. He makes me feel uncomfortable sometimes. Naruto smiled. I can share those thoughts, he said with a small nod of his head. Well, the Uzumaki males are operating under some laws. They are not permitted to marry anyone who is not Uzumaki. Why? Guren asked curiously. She had noticed though, every Uzumaki family was full of redheads. They associated with other people in the village, but they still didn't enter relationships with other people. They want to grow their clan and they don't want to see their blood die out, Haku said. But there is another good reason, and it has nothing to do with growth. You know the Uzumaki have a strong life force and utilize chakra chains. This diminishes when you are not a full-blooded Uzumaki. The value of the chakra diminishes, and if they continue to mingle, they will eventually lose all the traits that make them special. You are already married to Princess Kyuki, and she wants a child. What is going to happen there? Guren asked Naruto. She already knew that not all his parents were Uzumaki. Who knows? Naruto said with a shrug. You two should think carefully though, your slow pace in settling down is being tolerated now, especially for you, Guren. Time is moving, and very soon, we will be fighting. You need to make preparations before those fights. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.